Okay, well, thank you, Noelle and Bob and CCC for setting up this opportunity to be part of World Unity Week with these amazing education reformers and luminaries. Today, we are going to be talking about bringing the message of oneness to education globally. And we do have a global group here, which is absolutely amazing. Thank you, Dr. Elias, for getting up in the middle of the night. What I'd like to do is I'd like to read a little bit to start out the conversation so people have an idea about the content here, and then introduce our guests. First of all, my name is Kathy Mason. If you don't know me, I am involved with Co-Creators Convergence. I own a marketing company and publishing company called Mason Works. What we're going to be talking about today is an opportunity for education to reform at a high level, and an opportunity that is actually being implemented across the world, maybe not quite yet in the US. Dr. Bill Spady has written several books on education reform that he's going to be talking about, and about raising your consciousness in the hopes to create an education system that allows us to evolve and allows our children to create the new earth that we want, full of unity and peace. About outcome-based education, which is OBE, that acronym is used in so many different ways, and a lot of times incorrectly. Outcome-based education is known throughout the world by its acronym, OBE. Most educators recognize those letters because—
Kathy, excuse me.
Yeah.
Facebook, we've been having a lot of trouble with Facebook. It did not go live on Facebook.
Okay.
Let me try it again. I'm sorry.
Send it to co-creators. There'll be less traffic there.
Should I stop my recording?
Yeah, let's stop recording.
So today I am lucky to introduce you to these amazing international education reform specialists about a subject called bringing the message of oneness to education globally. And what we will be talking about is OBE, an acronym that is not always understood. Outcome-based education is known throughout the world by its acronym OBE. Most educators recognize those letters because of the O word, outcomes, which is commonly associated with various indicators of student learning. Today, those indicators are mostly artifacts of the numerical system that is overlaid on what students actually demonstrate. Hence, the scores, numbers, points, and percents, and ratios commonly used to define outcomes are simply a convenience, but they are not the actual outcomes. Instead, they are incidental result of the system used to label the performance being assessed. If you are new to this subject, you're in for an eye-opening discussion on how education can best empower people, and in that process, lead us to a world of oneness. Please welcome these international OBE experts here to discuss their experience with human learning opportunities and oneness. Dr. William Spady, please wave. There you go, thank you. Rowe. Thank you. And Dr. Elias Sampa.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And we would love, I'm now going to pretty much turn over this conversation to Dr. Bill, because I'm not going to be as formal with him. And he has often been called the father of OBE. So this is really an area of expertise that he has put a lot of his energy into for over 50 years. And he's actively held the vision of education's role to serve us all. So Dr. Bill, could you share your concept of OBE and how it can shape the future?
Well, I'll try, but it's difficult because I just wrote a little paper that I've sent to some of my colleagues, in which I identify 9 very viable opportunities, or I should say versions of what O, B, and E stand for. So there are 9 O's and there are 9 E's, but there's only one B. And that B is the word based. Okay, for we understood from the very beginning, in fact, I understood the minute I heard about the grounding issues around this concept, that based meant, okay, focused on and defined by and organized around and built around and reinforced by, and therefore whatever you were going to do in education was going to be based on something. Well, what I discovered just simultaneously, intuitively, given my background as a sociologist, is that the education system is based on time. Everything in the system, in fact, is defined by how much time it's supposed to take. So it's a time-based system. We have school years, we have semesters, we have grading periods, we have class periods. We've got all of these schedule-driven things, and they're really all defined and built around one key thing. And it's that revelation that launched this literally career-long commitment to make real OBE happen. That awareness was the fact that the credentialing system of education, that is how we give credit, okay, how people get promoted, how they get graduated, how we give degrees, all of that, the credentialing system defines the instructional system, okay? Therefore, everything we do has to fit into the time blocks. We call them credit hours. We called it seat time back in the era. All of that was defined around time, not around learning, not around real learning results, but around an organizational template that we came to realize was built around the factory assembly line, so that everything regulated and operated and moved through the system in a very uniform sort of way, just like an assembly line, because it was based on the age of kids and it was based on the calendar. I said, man, we can do something better than this. And I began to really delve into what those concepts are, what those possibilities are, et cetera. And fortunately, I was in a national position that gave me enormous amount of visibility with educators all around the United States, superintendents particularly. And we began to put out a message about how to think differently and how you could operate differently in a way that was really based on what we wanted students to learn. So I know that my colleague Al, who is on this discussion with me, I know he picked these ideas up, and I'm happy to say that in recent years, I've been invited to the Philippines to bring this work there, and I discovered Elias. And I must say, what a talent and what a range of experience he has with this concept. So I wanted this to be a wide open discussion among us, because one of those 9 versions is the one I call outcome-based evolution. And this concept has undergone an incredible evolution in the 50 years that I've been involved with it. And that evolution has gotten us deeper and deeper and deeper into the essence of the human being. Who is that person what's the reality that we really embody as humans, as spiritual human beings, and it has led us to the O word, oneness. So in that evolution, we have gone this far. And I know these two colleagues have shared in that evolution. So Al, I might start with you since we've been in this together the longest. What drew you to this? How did you get involved? And why would any educator out there, et cetera, want to be attracted to this concept?
Well, thank you for the question. And it's where I'm going to respond is probably the opposite of where unity resides in our present state of things. Basically, started examining this in the 80s. I was a school administrator for 45 years and continue to move ahead with where we are right now. But what drew me into this was the centrality of the human being and humanity itself. And that meaning, wait a minute, what is the exact effect here on students in this time-based system, this factory model that we were all living in? And so that was number one. Number two, crystal clear, we clearly were very educated. I'm checking in my internet connection here a moment. We wanted to get
You're breaking up.
in regard to its select. Yeah, I was pausing there for a moment just to see. Give me a signal if you can hear me clearly. If not, okay, good. We'll do the signal method. Things go right sound-wise. But we came face to face with schools who are in the select and sort business. Credentialing, credits were driving literally everything and have for decades and still today. In fact, if you think about education, it basically is, let's sort people into buckets, A's, B's, C's, and all various names of credentials. And we had the mantra of OBE being success for all. Well, that was incongruent. And so that pulled me in instantly. And so what happened is we really came to the fundamental understanding that instead of just picking winners and losers, when in fact we need everyone thriving and flourishing in our society for the greater good, we needed to make some serious changes. So that drew me in and we started the journey. And at some point in time here, I can describe our early work and then where that work exists today. But go ahead and continue, Bill.
Yeah, well, thank you. Elias, how did you get in? What pulled you into this concept? Because obviously it came from a very different international grounding and experience. Please share that with us.
Thank you so much for having me. My experience has been more really, I was quite fortunate to be exposed to different educational systems. I originally come from Zambia and, working in the Philippines and studying in the Philippines partly and teaching also. But one thing that stood out in my training was the idea of being very much grades credential driven as really a common practice in many of these school systems that I've seen. But at the same time, I realized that what we tended to overlook are the essential ingredients of what make a person unique or different. And it seems to me that much of our school system did not pay attention to that, because as soon as you stay in school, you needed to be structured in a way that you have to fit in a particular box. So you have the inputs and outputs. And that practice, which Bill has come to call educentrism, was really very strong. And I thought in the beginning, it was good to compete. You have to be really on top of someone in order to really be very successful. But I realized soon that it was actually very unsustainable on a personal level, but also on the professional level. As a teacher and administrator, I felt that something was missing. So encountering the concept of outcomes where we focus on bringing the very best out of every individual person, and that at some point, the school system doesn't actually help us to become the full human beings we can be. On the contrary, it tends to really block us. It tends to limit us so much. And so my realization was that if we reverse, if we started talking about what more can we get out of a human being, or how do we facilitate an individual to become better and more fruitful in every different dimensions. So from that moment on, I was quite fortunate to encounter a number of writings and books coming from Bills and a few others who have contributed to the thought of transforming education in this aspect. So from that time on, I realized to myself that there was a need to have a bit of paradigm shift in terms of what we focused on in the school system and in terms of myself as well. Because if you do not work on yourself to begin to see the reality around you in the school system different, then it's very difficult to have any impact at all. So I think that initiated my movement, and I'm quite fortunate that that whole experience has been evolving. When I thought that I'm getting it right, and I realized there were more dimensions to come. And so I think I'm on that process now, trying to really expand my personal awareness and deepening of what it is to be truly involved or embedded in education, in the educational system that really transforms.
Well, thank you for that. You know, you've already led me to, I think, one of the biggest of big paradigm shifts that OBE itself has undergone. But I want to back up so that there is some continuity. This concept emerged out of the work of a man named Benjamin Bloom, who's very famous to educators, okay, for work that he has done regarding typologies and taxonomies of kinds of learning. But what few people know by comparison is the work that he was doing in the late 1960s on a concept called mastery learning. And Bloom was beginning to challenge some of the time-based, and I'm going to call it single opportunity, okay, concepts that were embedded in education. That is, once you take a test, there's the grade, it goes in the book, and it gets averaged with all the other stuff that gets averaged, which is nothing but artificial numbers, okay? Well, Bloom said, we can give kids second chances. We can provide more clarity in the instructional process. We can do various things there to assure there's going to be more successful learning for every student. So I was told about that, and when those basic fundamentals were explained to me, that's when I said those famous words, "This will never work." And the reason this will never work is it was a classroom-based instructional approach. That's the good news, because it was about teachers, okay? And it was about the learning process. But it ignored the larger system realities. And as a sociologist, I was totally attuned to those system realities, and that's where the notion of a time-based system with everything governed by certification, which was itself defined by time, that's what I said, oh my goodness, we're going to have to change that if we are really going to open up the opportunity structure in the schools. Well, basically what OBE was nothing more than mastery learning until 1986. And that is when a set of circumstances unfolded that made me realize We call ourselves outcome-based education, but we don't even know what an outcome is. Okay, because all we had was points and scores and percents and ratios and all of that numerical stuff, but we didn't really know the substance of what an outcome was. So I took a group of leading OBE teachers, mastery learning teachers at the time, and we locked ourselves in a room one Wednesday afternoon, and I said, if we don't have a definition of what an outcome is, I quit, because this is hypocrisy. Well, we came up with a definition, and they were key in shaping that definition. We said an outcome is a culminating demonstration of learning. It's not just what happens in your head, but it's what you can do with what's happening in your head. And culminating doesn't mean just this week's test and this week's material. It means what's the ultimate result? What is ultimately do we want the students to do? Well, that moved the whole paradigm up a gigantic notch, and we began to talk about high school graduation, which we called exit outcomes. When they walk out the door, what kind of human beings do you want these people to be? Well, that took us beyond curriculum. So there was just, there was a whole period of just challenging and challenging and challenging aspects of the status quo that made us realize, yes, human beings are much more than the curriculum in schools. The curriculum in schools is just one more version of the box everything is boxed into. And yes, Elias, I ended up calling that set of boxes educentrism. It's a closed system where everything is self-reinforcing around this time-based factory notion of how we should be operating. And I think that's when Al really jumped in seriously, is when we really began to push the concept of outcomes having to do with the human being, not the curriculum. Am I right, Al?
You're exactly right. In fact, what comes to mind is I can think about a quick story where a kindergartner said directly to a small group of us when he said, I'm not very good at a certain task. And one of us asked, well, what are you working on right now to get better? And he paused and he said, I'm getting better at reflection and self-assessment. We knew we had definitely made a change, because the consciousness of human potential thrives and is in harmony with the natural world that young and even before. And so some of the changes we made were organizational, but they were all founded on the hub of that deep self-reflection, just like that student mentioned. And they were things such as student-led parent conferences, K through 12.
Yes.
They were self-reflection portfolios, K through 12. They were senior exhibitions at graduations, K through 12. There was a performance-based diploma in place, and the target, 100% of the students would graduate with college credit, if not degrees, and this was back in the 80s. Now, all these things have kind of started to evolve and continue to evolve, but they go right back dead in center to the student. And in fact, with that in mind, I recall one of our folks said, we don't ever want to steal learning from the students by doing our explanations of everything for them. We need to empower them to move forward in a different space. And so that's part of the shift that occurred, Bill.
Well, Elias, I'd like you to comment on this, because Al and I have a colleague that you've not had the opportunity to meet, who has started an alternative high school that is very, very much about learner empowerment and self-direction. And I'm happy to say that way back in the late 80s and early 90s, when I was leading a consulting group of very talented, very, very talented instructional people, we came to the conclusion that the most important outcome of anything at the time to empower students for the future was something we called being a self-directed learner, okay? That if you're not self-directed, if you aren't in charge of your own learning and self-intrinsic motivation as a learner, you are going to have a very unhappy future, okay? Because in the 1980s, and some of our audience are not old enough, I'm sure, to remember the 1980s, but it was a decade of phenomenal technological transformation. I mean, we think all kinds of technology is happening now, but the roots of all of that began to really unfold and unfold and unfold. And the watchwords were, everything is changing, which means our whole paradigm of understanding how life works and how life unfolds on this plane was changing, and changing. But the education system was stuck. And it was stuck around the word curriculum. And our colleague, Trace Pickering, who's run this school, has said the #1 obstacle word is curriculum, because curriculum is a predefined set of things the students are supposed to learn, okay? They're called requirements. That's what leads to credit. You're not going to get a degree unless you do it, blah, blah, blah. And none of that had to do with the human being, the individual. So I know you have been focused on curriculum and on trying to give educators a bigger vision of curriculum. And I'd like you to share what's been happening for you, I think, both in your Filipino experience and also in Australia.
Yeah, we have tried to kind of redirect a little bit, but not really achieving that direction in its fullness. But the idea has been to actually begin by defining what we want to happen, becoming future focused, because the education we have inherited tells you, here is a textbook, this is good for grade 1, that's good for grade 2, and that's good for that. So we've been, education has tended to become with resources first. So you talk about content and activities to do, and then we begin to think about where will this lead us. But what we have done is to try to begin by really defining the direction. What kind of human beings we want to see in the world? What kind of future do we want to have? And beginning with that question then opens up a different approach to understanding even the traditional things that we do in school. Because then when we define the direction we want, the future we want, and the aspirations that history teaches about what is possible in life, that inform the direction we have to move. So we try to cluster that into essential statements of outcomes that are much broader before we begin to define a few that would be specific to different contexts of learning. But I think it changes so much the thinking and the mindset, because when educators are beginning to understand education by looking at what future are we working on here, and when we ask students, where do you want to go? What kind of human being do you want to be? And then in that sense, everything that they're going to do in school, even the environment in the school system, become much more a support structure that provide vast experience experiences, learning experiences, that then begin to shape the lives of the learners as well as teachers. So, but that really has become very important work, and I'm grateful that Bill was very helped so much to guide the system here in the Philippines. And I have seen also similar efforts have happened so much in Australia, Western Australia and other parts, where they are beginning really to put much emphasis on what they call the outcomes. And so you try to be as clear as possible with the kind of outcomes that you shape. And they are so designed to transcend content, transcend activities. It's about the human beings. And then you try to see now, how does this then shape what we do and how we go through the school system. And at the same time, recognizing the differences of the learners and the different aspirations. And so we are really entering into shaping different futures and possibilities that can exist for every child. So I think that has been a game changer, I might say. And when Bill mentioned that 1986, trying to define what an outcome is, that has become very, very important to much of the work we are doing. I have been part of this curriculum design stuff, and there are a few terminologies that we use quite often, loosely. Words like inputs and outputs. Yeah, these words are very powerful. But actually, for much of the work before, it has been very much about the inputs and outputs. So it's what the teachers will do and what the schools will put into the child. And then what comes out of the child, that's it. But then we did not really think about the beyond the school context. What happens beyond the school? How do we remain focused into this particular learner beyond the school? So then in this case, you are going to see that when we talk about the inputs and outputs, these things become much more secondary. The primary things become more of the outcomes and the possible impacts that the lives of these learners will really contribute to our universe. And it becomes really a major invitation into really celebration of life, knowing also that whatever outcomes you are going to articulate, they are limited. They are going to be limited because we are informed by our history, we are informed by experiences we have. So in that defining of the outcomes also create a challenge where we have to be sure that we don't create outcomes that are too narrow, that are much more about completing stuff and tasks and contents within the school system, but that we are really looking into the possible futures that sometimes we are not even very sure ourselves. But we try to know that, yes, humanity is full of possibilities. If we are looking at how much we can evolve, how much our spiritual essence can be really expanded, and we allow that language to be part of how we go about school, then maybe we can make a bit of a little bit of transformation where we open up a lot more possibilities. So essentially, that's a bit of the work that we are doing, that I've been doing both with my graduate students as well as giving trainings and sessions to the teachers and faculty in universities. So the centrality is, how do we define the outcomes? And also the other important component we have added, which has been, I think, very important as well, is to create a shift from kinds of assessment that we do. Traditionally, we have always counted their scores and marks and all that, where you ask students to identify stuff, and then you saw your marks are, you got 10 out of 10, so you're brilliant. To begin to talk about the abilities that people develop in a very holistic sense, and you attempt to really articulate as best as you can using what we are calling criterion-defined assessment, which tend to be far much more holistic. You are looking at multiple dimensions of human essence and human development, which is not tied simply to the scores and marks that students get on the whatever test you give them. And we know that whatever test you're going to give, it's really basically compounded within the inputs that you give. So you can't actually measure how much a person has learned by simply giving them a test, of get what is right and what is wrong. We know that real life that people have to live, being a parent or being a human being, being a professional person, really transcends what answers can be found in the textbook, but it requires really engaging the whole person, reflecting, and trying to find possibilities. So I think that's the direction that we are trying to move our education into, following that dimension of the outcome in focus.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'd like to recall two things that happened in the 1990s in this long story that we're telling here about the evolution of OBE that are absolutely pivotal to everything that both Al and Elias have said. In 1991, I was working with a school district in Colorado that wanted to define its exit outcomes for students in terms of, future focusing and what really matters. And a miracle unfolded, and we ended up with a whole different framework around which we can work. And that has become a template that has shaped everything ever since. It was about life performers. What kind of human beings in life performance terms, performance roles, okay, do we want? And they had a very simple frame. We ended up with a very simple framework, okay? Self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, okay, community contributors, and quality producers. Now, that was absolutely the very first little elementary version of this sort of thing, but they said it doesn't matter what students' grades are going to be, what their rank in class is, what college they're going to go to, blah, 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 what race they are, what sex they are. If they are not self-directed learners, collaborative workers, etc., when they walk out of here, they're going to have a very unhappy future. Now that template, that role performer template got linked to something that happened literally for me as a revelation in the late 90s. And that was around the concept of total learner. What do we want a total learner to be? Because I had already written a book with my colleague, Dr. Charles Schwann, called Total Leaders, which was about the conditions we have to create in education and business, et cetera, if leaders are going to be effective. And there were 5 major things in that framework. Well, what hit me is that total leaders and total learners and total living were all linked to the same things. And we ended up with a framework that I took to my colleagues and said, okay, how do we make this better? What's true here? And we ended up with something called the 5 C's. And the 5 C's, okay, were consciousness, creativity, collaboration, okay, competence, and compassion. And I framed them in a y-axis and an x-axis. So it looked like this, okay, where these were sort of the productive qualities and roles of people. And these were the links, okay, compassion and collaboration. These were the social links with consciousness in the middle of all of that. And we have worked to expand and enrich and develop the meaning of those 5 C words ever since, and built outcome frameworks around them in the Philippines and in other countries, South Africa. I took their whole curriculum framework of outcomes, et cetera, and synthesized it into a very workable model around that. So those 5 C's have been, especially, I'm going to say, the horizontal dimension of compassion, collaboration with consciousness in the middle. That's the key to empowerment. That is the real key to empowerment, and that is the key to oneness. What education has been focused on is the vertical dimension. How do we make people more competent And how do we apply that competence in innovative, creative ways out there in the business world and the economic world? But they have forgotten, completely forgotten that horizontal dimension. That's what the 5 C's have done. It's given educators a holistic sense of, this is the kind of person we want to create, and this is what they will bring to the world. And I know you're familiar with that, Elias, and Al and I have talked about that extensively, okay, as the key that moves us from empowerment, where the adults put stuff in the heads of the kids, to empowerment, where we draw these qualities and cultivate these qualities out of the learner. Okay, it's the gigantic shift from being system-based to being person-based in our approach to education. Al, would you like to comment on that?
Oh, absolutely. And so from where we started the conversation, over here, we were talking about education and its select and sort and the curriculum design and the like in a way. The shift is very profound and subtle, but to make this shift as to where things are evolving is, for me, I just took out the A out of education. The grade chasing A, addictive grade chaser, go to school, check the box, comply, get a grade, degree, and call yourself prepared is an illusion of being future ready or ready in the present. When you pull the A out and you make it really, really big, we're at what's called, I think, it's called an enunciation moment. It's where a glimpse into something just grabs you and go, oh my word. We need to look at that A as awareness,
Yes.
consciousness, and
Yes.
who am I and where am I going in a holistic, harmonious way, every person. And so that shift that Bill just started to discuss, education, retransform, pull the A out, what do you have? You have something that's called eduction. And that means the verb that goes with that is educe, draw out of the human potential that is resident within each human being. And so how do we do that, Elias, in a way? It occurred in just basic conversations. Remember I said we were doing student-led conferences and exhibitions and portfolios? Well, it's pretty simple. Whatever you are doing, and this could be any subject, any topic, any project, you just add on about 2 or 3 questions like, and in what ways is that helping you be a better self-directed learner, future worker, mom and dad? Oh, in what way is what you're learning and working on helping others benefit in their lives? And the third question is, and what evidence do you have that your learning is having a positive effect on the world? So you're basically taking cognitive, academic, typically rigorous things, which you want as content evolves, and you're just plugging in the social, emotional, and physicality of the whole person in regard to the evolution of OBE into what is now occurring, and the table is set. I think World Unity has done a wonderful job of setting a table here for what is going to be the response of educators. And we have the most unbelievable educators doing incredible things who are really hungry, and many are living the life of what it means to draw out that potential as education evolves. And now what's the next moment going to be?
I have a viewpoint about this that continues to strengthen and strengthen as I myself personally continue to do more very deep inner work. And that is, if the teachers, if the educators themselves have not gone through a genuine empowerment, awakening experience about their inner essence, they're not going to be able to model that. And they're not going to be able to really draw the deep authenticity of that out of the kids. They'll be going through the motions, they'll be saying the words, but in terms of living it, modeling it, exemplifying, etc., that's not going to be in the picture. So to me, that means the entire focus on professional development, which I know you're very interested in, Al, and Elias also. Professional development has got to be development of the human being, not development of their subject matter expertise or their pedagogical expertise per se. But in terms of really going inside and letting them get attuned to and aware of their own inner being so that they can bring that out in others.
I'd like just to say that when I look back on it, probably the most beautiful emergence that occurred during these decades has been observing the depth at which faculty grow into leaders when they're allowed to function as a whole person, and setting up the conditions for faculty to thrive and flourish. And so the leaders of now and into the future are so capable and so high impact because they see this, and they see it within all people in their communities as well, moms and dads and business owners and partners in this kind of work. And so when we sit here and in the post-COVID period and all the realizations that we've had, we're sitting at a precipice here where you might say, out of some self-questioning, there's a whole new construct of us seeing ourselves as human beings. And all of us can have that impact on children, our neighbor, and one another. And so you talk about a unifying dimension. I think that that's where you really start seeing that maturity of what was used to be a version of OBE is now evolving in another way.
Absolutely. I mean, outcome-based, in terms of curriculum-based outcomes, has absolutely shifted in its overall confidence, in its grounding, Kathy, the nine steps have been there's been a threshold, a tipping point that has led then to something that I call ownership-based empowerment, where you really understand and embody your own talents and skills, etc. There's something we call openness-based exploration, where we're really willing to let kids explore what's true about the universe themselves and everything. Okay, I mean, this is just getting us farther and farther away from required content, and those are the keys to what Al and I have called oneness-based embodiment. And I've talked about a framework. I'd like the audience to know. There's a book available that Kathy helped publish. We call it Outcome-Based Education's Empowering Essence. It's available on Amazon in a variety of different formats. But I'm really telling the story there of that evolution and of its enormous potential, and really going out on the limb for a lot of public educators who feel that they're constrained by these various things and saying, here's where we're going. Here's what oneness, here's what openness to oneness can really be about. Kathy, I see there are a million chats, undoubtedly lots and lots of questions. I think, we'd be very pleased to
Okay, so I
answer
just
questions.
put the
Yeah,
Amazon link.
Elias, please. Elias would like to share something, please.
Okay,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
I just want to pick up on the point that Bill, you raised about what faculty can do on their level. I think that has been very, very critical. If we really have to do something more consistent with really transforming our educational system. I learned two things in the school. One is most teachers feel constrained by the external requirements. External requirements would be more of students who take the same tests, everybody takes the same test, and we are going to rank them. Now, I have also seen that in some places, like the Philippines here and Australia, from K to 10, they do not have those universal tests. Students are much more holistically assessed, and you don't see that much tension coming up. Teachers are more relaxed and more willing to differentiate and to do a number of things that can help the child to progress or the learner to progress. But as soon as they strike requirements for tests, the dynamics change. Then the other element I've seen on a personal level is more of how much teachers are willing to really listen, to allow students to grow. Because there is a temptation, if you are, you're handling multiple classes and, staying many students, it's easy for you to ask everybody 1 + 1 = 2. That becomes very easy for you to check to make sure that I have confidence everybody is learning because they all can answer 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, yeah. So there is a certain sense of assurance that, oh, I'm doing the right thing. But then it requires a lot of discipline and a lot of interest in the evolution of the students themselves. How do you accompany? Because if you are having 3, 4, 5 different types of students, and each one is trying to pursue their own futures and interests within the subject context or anything you are teaching, it requires a lot of discipline on a personal level to try to mentor, to try to encourage, to try to inspire. And I think when teachers haven't done their own inner work, that becomes a bit like an inconvenience. So I think that is an area where we really need to ensure that, yes, if you really want to do something in the space of outcome-based and to be true to this philosophy and principles, then you have to really do your own inner work. How much willing am I? How prepared am I to really be a listener, a learner, constant learner, always willing not to be a master of everything, not to be a person who has ideas to put in the heads of the students, but someone who explore and who really live by the same 5 C's in a sense. And you are willing to be a co-learner with the learners. And sometimes teachers are not comfortable with that status. They feel like they are demoted. So there's always a temptation to look much smarter than everybody else.
Yes.
And so that really creates some problems.
Kathy, you want to go ahead with
Sure. We're having some interesting conversations here. I would like to ask the whole panel before I get into the chat about the possible, how do you see the future of implementing OBE in this future paradigm? We're post-COVID, now we're online. Not all classes are in person. How do you see this possibility of actually developing creativity and creative problem solving really is what we're talking about. So we're talking about a competent person who can figure it out rather than look it up. How do you see this happening? Because let's say in the next 5 years.
Well, personally, I've been part of preparing teachers and going through in the process of really, in the Philippines, we are moving in the second year of implementing remote learning. So it was really very scary in the beginning. You have, parents not knowing what to do, teachers not knowing how to follow up with their students. But I think one of the things that have emerged is that teachers and school systems are being forced to really let go of control and allow students to learn. So the less they teach, the more students are learning. So and I think that that has become a greater opening, because you can no longer rely on controlling your inputs and controlling your students, your class, and all that. But you have to believe in the potential of the students, in the kind of guidance we can give them, where they can freely choose, where they can be inspired to pursue their aspirations. I think that that's one possibility. I feel like it's really an opening, where more and more we are realizing that actually students can learn without teachers. Okay, and that curriculum doesn't have to be heavy with content, but that it has to be a guidance, where students are provided multiple options and directions, where the resources that we give them, whether it's an online digital resources or maybe textbooks, become literary resources, not the curriculum. Right? So they are sources of information, they are sources of learning. You don't have to be concerned with, you finish page 1 before you can go to page 2. But actually, you need to understand, what do you want to happen to the students? How do you want them to move in? And put that in their hands so that they can lead learning. And then you become a person who provide comments, feedbacks, and support that is needed. And I think that seems to be an evolving paradigm. I've seen that teachers are nervous, schools are nervous because they want to control. But the truth is, it seems that many students are learning better. We've been trying to get feedback from the students, at least in the Philippine context. How is it? But most of what they are giving us positive experiences, that they are ready to move at their own pace. And they feel like they are in control of their own learning. Of course, there are experiences of feeling loneliness, those kind of psychosocial aspects of it, which require that they get together with their colleagues and feel. But as far as the learning space is concerned, I think that more and more, the experience has forced OBE to take root, in a sense, where we really let the learner explore their direction. And also, less on content. Stop giving too much of content. Contents don't teach. Activities don't teach. Students learn. So the job we need to do is to help them visualize their futures and help them to get into how to empower themselves, not teachers putting that in them. And I think that seems to be evolving quite positively from the initial indicators that we are seeing. And if that continues, if we don't go back to the old normal, I think that there's a lot of opportunities down there. Also in the field of assessment, I have seen most of these assessment institutions, IB, IGCS, and a few others, they really landed in serious problems because they cannot put students together to do the exams and all this stuff. So they kind of changed, modified a few things. And so where we are right now is really more of providing more options, more pathways for students to demonstrate evidence of learning, which doesn't have to be uniform, but students can submit something that can demonstrate how well they have learned and how competent they have become. And I think this is also true in terms of professional life. I mean, we don't go to work and be tested every single day, in order to determine whether we are doing well in the place of work. But there's a very holistic way that we're able to demonstrate our performance. And I think that is entering the school system. And I think if that continues, I recognize that as a dimension that is going to be very, very helpful for the school system to become better than it has been.
That is fantastic. Well, I'm so excited that there's other places in the world that will allow this creative system. For Al and Bill, do you want to speak to the US? And Al's been doing a great job on the chat.
Kathy, give me a second for a commercial announcement.
Okay.
In 2017, Elias and Al and I and other international colleagues created an organization called the International Network for Outcome-Based Education. The acronym is IN, for the number 4, OBE. There's a website. We are growing, okay, we've had our first country chapter of the organization join us, okay? It's the country of Bangladesh. They are absolutely in need of major technical support, visionary support, etc. And we've got a formal agreement now with them to provide that kind of support. We're working on a connection to an area, a region within India to establish that. And we are absolutely open to other kinds of partners who are interested in these ideas. We have a colleague named Wajid Hussein, who's in Saudi Arabia, who's coordinating a massive amount of all of this stuff. So we want to reach out to the world, and we are giving a message of, I'm calling it elevating humanity's future. And that future is only going to get elevated when we are bringing this paradigm of oneness and connection and cooperation and compassion to the education world, not just curricular and content and cognitive proficiency. So we're carrying that. We're going to be doing a big international event. If you go to the website, inforobe.org, you'll see all kinds of stuff about this giant event that we're going to be creating in the fall with over a dozen presenters, including these two gentlemen and myself in this program. So we're taking a lot of initiative in that regard to spread the word to thousands of educators across the world.
Okay. So Al, would you like to go through your alphabet offering? Because in the chat, so we started with the 5 C's, which I got them as best I could. And then it became the 6 C's, and then it became the 7 C's.
Oh, yeah, it
And
could
then-
go on forever.
And then Al
Well, yes.
started on the alphabet.
Well, the first thing is let me frame it this way, Kathy, and thanks for touching base. One is shift 1 is traditional OBE in a grade system, A, B, C, D, F, okay? So everybody in the world walks around with a mental model of A, B, C, D, F. And the world's grade addicted credit chasing mentality is to only get A's and B's, and whoever gets those wins the game.
Right.
Well, we all know that there's more to it than the label. People can get high grades and still not have the attributes to thrive in this world, okay? So the old system is A, B, C, D, F. Now we, remember that was education. We pulled the A out into education, and we're drawing out now. And I have always wanted to know, whatever happened to the E to begin with? Well, it turns out, I guess it was empowerment. So if you pull the E out, and plus you could pull out essence and emergence and efficacy and anything else you want,
Yeah.
then you start going, oh, D, deliberate, with intention, attention, inspiration, and impact. That we could put that on an I after the H. So we got deliberate. We've got people who, how can we become more deliberate in growing and contributing to the larger, greater good? How could we evolve as another E into going through these various segments of OBE and see the evolution? How could we, let's get into the whole world of Seligman and flourishing and human flourishing, F. And by the way, when you're flourishing, as I learned in watching and observing our students in elementary, they would have discussions about the F word, only not what we're all thinking here, it'd be failure. And they would have dialogues, structured dialogues as part of their habits to talk about chosen setbacks. When third graders start talking about chosen setbacks, and parents and 12th graders and workers, you sit back and you go, what does that sound like? Well, we have organizations now that are deliberately developmental organizations redesigning themselves around adult constructivist theory and the like, with stages and states for us to really rethink our grade levels, our learning opportunities, and how we view and help one another. And so you can go on here and it gets right down to my mantra is G3. And it's just, how about mine is, this is my G-force. It's called grow goodness with gratefulness. And in every moment, regardless of any conflict with anybody, it basically is when curiosity precedes gratefulness shows up. We don't have to be perfect. Perfect is a secondary
Illusion.
It's an illusion, along with control and perfection,
Yeah.
which are illusions, and really a part of the opposite of love is hate, but it really isn't. It's fear. And so what we're talking about is, what are we afraid of? If we weren't afraid of our own potential coming to thrive in this way, maybe we should shift to a different way of thinking, and that might be D through H, I, take you all the way to Z, Kathy.
That's fabulous. Yeah, I love it. And I love that the fact that the paradigm use of all these letters are like brands. You're branded on your forehead, which follows people, something they did in second grade may follow them their whole adult life. So this is really powerful. And again, creative problem solving is missing for most of the, I would say 25-year-olds on down, if they haven't been exposed to this, or if they haven't gone to a private school that does the arts or homeschooling, they haven't been exposed to the
joy
of making a mess.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Wow. So
Kathy, I'd like to mention one more thing that's related
Perfect.
to what Elias had just said.
Mhm.
And this is another commercial announcement, okay?
Okay.
In my latest book, okay, where I've really tried to cover the territory of what have been the significant milestones, okay, in this 50-year evolution, I have included what I call the life performance wheel. It's in chapter 6 of the book. I created that wheel with the over a period of 3 years of refinement, because I started with Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive objectives. Okay. And I said, okay, that's about what happens in the head, but what can people do with what happens in their head? All right. And I took the elements of his taxonomy, constructed half a wheel. I constructed what I call the technical functional half of a wheel out of the cognitive stuff. I said, what's missing? Well, what's missing is, in fact, all of the interpersonal relational stuff that makes life work for people, okay? So I took all my experience and put elements there, and then went around and asked people, okay, what does this need? Is this right? What should we do to improve it? Is this comprehensive enough? Blah, blah, blah. Are these the right words, etc. I got endorsements of this thing from corporate leaders, okay, of large corporations down to, okay, classroom primary teachers. And when our organization was really bringing this to the world very, very strongly, I remember walking by a couple of the rooms where my colleagues were doing presentations, and I would see this diagram, and they would have the circle with these things representing the wheel, and they would have this diagonal going basically all the way up through grade 12. From kindergarten to grade 12, kids can do these things. They're learning the performance roles, the interpersonal skills, the problem solving. In fact, this has problem finders and solvers, Kathy. They can do all of this stuff.
Yep.
And when COVID hit, and I'm seeing all of the stuff about parents don't know what to teach their kids, here it is, because parents, human beings, real live adults, no matter what your profession, you have to do all of those things. A parent, to be a functioning, effective adult, has to be good at every one of those things in the wheel. They could be tutoring and teaching their kids those very things. And it addresses the comprehensive nature of what we're putting on the table here in this presentation.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much. I want to offer if anyone wants to get on camera, and I'd be happy to unmute you, or you can help me unmute you. If anyone wants to get on right now, love for you to participate in this so that we can have some real life.
I see one of my classical music colleagues from my youth on here, Kathy.
Oh, that's great.
Diane violin, maybe. I'd like to hear what she has to say as a classical musician.
Okay, I'm asking her to unmute. And I'm asking her to start her video. Hi.
Hi. I find it all very, very interesting. And it's hard to relate this to what I've seen in my career, and particularly with my children. And they've gone to public schools, and I'm in New York. So we're kind of a system unto ourselves, I understand. And I like these points that you bring up, Bill. I find them very concrete, things to hang on to, 5 C's. That's something that's easy to remember. But I also think back to having my children go to Montessori school, and they did creative learning. They were self-directed. And many of those aspects they learned at a very early age, and it's carried through their entire career. And I'm very happy for that background for them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think the challenge of this work is the public systems. Okay, I think, people always say, oh gosh, I think Montessori's could do this, or isn't this what Waldorf schools do? Well, the answer is yes and no on both of those. But I've struggled with the issue that public systems have gotten so locked into the accountability mentality and assuming the test scores are the answer to everything. I mean, it's a narrowing and narrowing and narrowing of what we mean by learning and what we mean by human development. I mean, that's what's sad, and that's why I think humanity's conception of all this truly needs to be elevated. And I think if the 3 of us and our colleagues and those who believe in what we're doing, if we don't speak out strongly about this, things won't change. The system will just keep grinding on the way it has for the last 125 years.
Okay, it looks like Bonnie Lee is unmuted, but not on video. Bonnie, would you like to come on video to ask your question?
I'm not able to, my machine's
okay,
disabled, but thank you very much. Actually, I assume you're allowing statements, and this is more of a statement that I'd like to make.
sure.
This talk and room that you've got has absolutely been fantastic. And I applaud you guys. I am so glad to have heard you all speak. It is wonderful. But if you noticed at the very beginning of the room, while we were just in chat mode, a couple of us talking back and forth, there was some negative concept that came through of the possibility that not educating the public is deliberate. And I'm going to say from my personal experience of over 50 years that that is what I personally believe that I experienced. Although I believe that someday uh, the door will open up to allow the education to happen, but to deliberately not educate the mass majority of the public has been definitely out there. And that's why I applaud you all so much. I have used my own way of giving the example of calling it one and a halfers, of there being like two options, and you can see them both, but you can't flip yourself on the majority from one to the other. There's a group of people that can, but there's a majority cannot. And that's what I would love to see is someday when people do have those two options or three options, you don't want to go too high, that they're able to flip themselves from one option to the other. And then you do have that empowerment. So again, I applaud you all very much. I thank you all very much. And Al Rowe, I can't applaud you enough. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you for your kind words.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
So,
you. Thank you.
so I'd love to, Nancy is texting a lot in the chat. Would you like to come on and share because you're doing a fun job? Would
Well,
you
I
like to come on camera, please?
no,
Oh, shucks.
it's a bad hair day. Plus, I don't know if you want to see me nude, you know? Why
Well,
not?
you spice it up here.
It might scare the audience. Yeah, words are the key. Words are the key. We've actually been mass brainwashed by Noah Webster's dictionary. Because if we think deeper, all negative words can be deleted. It's like the dark side and the light side of the moon. We think there has to be opposites. That's not true. True oneness is, okay, are people in hospitals really, quote, sick? No, they can just say, I am, you are, we are not healthy, unhealthy, have no health, lost their health, devoid of health. When we have an absence of health, we die. When we have super health, we're Olympic stars. So we've all been brainwashed. We're sick with the flu. We're sick with COVID. No, we lost our health. We're unhealthy, healthless. Same with, has anybody ever failed at anything on the planet in all of history? No. If we didn't brush our teeth or make our bed or write that chapter in a book or got a divorce or lost that job or didn't take that vacation, we simply were not successful, unsuccessful, lacking success. We were not successful. We did not succeed. We can use all these variations of the quote positive words, and I've actually sort of thought deeper on all of this, and I assigned the quote, I don't like to use positive and negative word connotation anymore. We can call the quote positive words the heart words. If we put our hands on our hearts right now and say, I am successful. Then push into the chest. I am unsuccessful. I am totally unsuccessful, not successful. Then come back to neutral. I am successful. Now open up your hands. I am more successful, very successful, totally successful with that relationship. Push your hands into your chest. I am totally unsuccessful with that relationship. And then if we put our hands on our heart, on our heads, the negative words can be the head words. I am a failure. Do I want to brainwash myself with that self-hatred talk? You are a failure. We are failing. No, there's absolutely no reason any negative word has to be chosen. If we're in fear, if someone's attacking us with a gun or an animal wants to jump on us, it's not that our fear is threatened. We're walking safely along in nature, out on the streets. All of a sudden, the gun is there, the animal is there. Our safety is threatened. Safety and fear are opposite words in the dictionary. So we want to return to more safety. We don't want to return to more fear.
Right, right.
Have you ever been sad, sorrow, or in grief? Somebody died? Just say, that's a head word. I don't want more of that. What's the opposite in the dictionary? Joy, happiness, delight. Any word will do. It's not a specific word. Any word will do that. And we can just say, I am emotionless and joyless, extremely lacking in joy that my beloved mother, father, child, spouse died. Then there's a emotionless period. And then we return to the joy of having their memory, the joy of their memory returns. We don't have to be in sorrow. This is all the power of words. This is my baby. I love words.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Because what we're talking about is labels, and grades are labels, and performance, the way it's set up, are labels. And what we're talking about is changing that paradigm altogether with a new possibility of seeing the opportunity to bring out the best in everyone.
Yes.
And to connect from that aspect, not from the label. The labels are all out of fear. You're right, they're not love.
Yeah, one final thing, when we have pure thoughts and pure words and pure intentions and pure actions, that's when heaven on earth comes. We can't say, I am sick and think about health. I want to be more healthy, but speak, I am sick. There's a mismatch of words. There's a disharmony, unharmony. We've got to blend the words we write, the words we speak, the words we think. The energy in the words is what matters. We can feel into, do I want to be sick? Do I want to go from less to more sickness? No. How about less to more health? Yes. Less to more sorrow, fear? No. Less to more safety, joy, abundance, prosperity. Nobody's poor on the planet. They're just extremely not rich, not prosperous, not financially abundant. We want more abundance, more prosperity, more richness. This is the power of words. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm sorry, we have to wrap up. I just got the text. So, but I want to make sure that everyone that watches this has been here now. Thank you so much for joining us. And also the people on the replay and the people all over Facebook land. And on my YouTube, where this will be later, that you are able to reach and contact and learn more from these illuminators. Bill, do you want to explain where you can be reached and how best to reach you?
Bill Spady at gmail.com.
Okay,
Spady. Feels
Okay.
very simple. Thank you.
okay. And Elias, will you?
It's same, Elias Sampa at gmail.com. One single S
One.
in the middle.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's right. And
And
Nancy,
Al.
if I can add a quick point on this, sorry.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Al.
Let's try to think about eliminating ranking of students.
Yep.
That's the major threat that is existing, because you cannot expect students to create if there's only one answer. So if we only eliminate a ranking of students, yeah, recognize potential, but do not rank. And in that sense, everybody will be successful without necessarily being on aspiring for low standards. So we can keep very high standards, but without ranking students. And that is precisely how we promote people in the places of work. You promote them not by way of ranking them, but by way of recognizing their contributions.
Right,
Yes, thank
right.
you very much.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. And so I actually found you, Elias, also on a Scholar Google site. So I
That's
don't
correct.
know if, okay, yeah. So I have put the sites, Bill's site and Elias's site in the chat. And Al has put his email. Al, how else would they reach you? Is that the best way?
That'd
Gmail?
be the best way.
Okay, so that's adale.rowe@gmail.com. And I'll put this in the content when I put it up online. So, so I hope everyone, this was a stimulating conversation. I look to see more of this being implemented, and I thank you so much for everything you're doing to make the world a better place and have education work with us on every level to support and create a new world. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bless
Thank you so much,
guys.
Kathy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thank you, Elias. I'm sorry it was so late for you. Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.